There's a particular kind of awareness that settles over you when you realize a man is watching. Not the careless glance of someone killing time, something more deliberate than that, more loaded. You feel it before you can name it. He sees you, and yet, nothing follows. No move, no approach. Just that steady, quiet attention hanging in the air between you like an unanswered question. It's maddening, isn't it? And if you've ever sat with that confusion, wondering what it means, what you're supposed to do with it, you're not alone. This particular experience has unsettled women for centuries, across every culture, every era. Not because women lack confidence or clarity, but because the situation itself contains a genuine contradiction. He's interested enough to notice, not enough, apparently, to act. But here's what most people miss. That gap between noticing and chasing isn't random. It isn't accidental. And it almost certainly isn't about you being somehow insufficient. Plato, in his dialogues on desire, argued that longing is ignited not by easy possession, but by tension, by the pull of something that requires effort to reach. Nietzsche took it further, suggesting that humans are drawn to whatever resists simplification, whatever forces a person to rise rather than coast. So when a man sees you and hesitates, there's often something almost paradoxical happening beneath the surface. He's not unmoved, he's calculating, unconsciously weighing what he perceives your value to be, what reaching you would actually require, whether he's the kind of man willing to take that kind of risk. His hesitation, in other words, can be a response to your presence, not an absence of reaction to it. We've been conditioned to read attention as promise, a prolonged gaze, a comment that lingers, the way he always seems to position himself nearby at a gathering. We interpret these as preludes to something more, and sometimes they are. But behavioral psychology is less romantic about it. Attention exists on a spectrum. It doesn't guarantee pursuit. Recognition is not commitment. A man can find you genuinely compelling and still not move, because movement carries stakes that admiration doesn't. To actually chase someone, you have to be willing to be rejected. You have to decide the risk is worth it. You have to, on some level, believe you deserve what you're reaching for. That's a lot of internal work, and not every man has done it. Then layer on top of that what technology has done to modern attraction. Social media has made observation essentially free. He can watch you from a distance, like a photo, catch a glimpse of your life, without any of the vulnerability that real-world pursuit demands. The digital world has made it possible to feel close to someone without taking a single actual step toward them. He notices you effortlessly. Chasing you would cost something. That asymmetry matters more than most people acknowledge. And here's the part that stings a little, but is worth sitting with. The qualities that make a woman most captivating. The confidence, the self-sufficiency, the sense that her life is already full and purposeful, are the same qualities that can give a man pause. Not because he's not attracted, because he is, and he's not sure he measures up. A woman who clearly doesn't need him to complete her picture is, to a certain kind of man, both deeply desirable and genuinely intimidating. His hesitation isn't a verdict on you. It's often a verdict on himself. The Renaissance courtesans understood something about this dynamic without ever reading a psychology paper. Women like Veronica Franco were admired by powerful men across Europe, celebrated for their intellect and autonomy as much as their beauty. And yet, many of those same men hesitated, held back by a combination of enchantment and the unsettling awareness that this woman had a world of her own. She did not need saving. She did not need completing. Her presence commanded, and that command created a particular kind of friction, the kind that makes pursuit feel meaningful rather than mechanical. The woman who moves through her life with genuine purpose, who doesn't orient herself around the question of whether he's watching, who cultivates passions and friendships entirely separate from his orbit, she creates that same friction without trying. And the man who watches her has to make a choice. Step forward and risk something real, or stay comfortable in admiration and never know. Most women, faced with his inaction, start to wonder whether they should simply close the gap themselves. Chase a little, signal more explicitly. And sometimes that impulse comes from a genuinely confident place. There's nothing wrong with a woman who knows what she wants and says so. But it's worth understanding the psychology before deciding. Because the moment she collapses her autonomy to secure his attention, reshaping herself around his interest, becoming available on demand, orbiting his schedule, something shifts. Not always immediately, but it shifts. The tension that made her magnetic quietly dissolves, and attention, which was always present, can remain while attraction fades. Mystery isn't a game. It isn't about pretending to be unavailable or manufacturing intrigue through half-truths. It's something simpler and harder than that. It's the natural byproduct of a woman who is genuinely, fully herself, whose inner life cannot be absorbed in a single glance, whose identity doesn't collapse under the weight of someone else's attention. That quality cannot be faked. It can only be lived. And when it's real, it does something to a man that flattery and availability simply cannot do. It makes him feel that knowing you would actually mean something. Sartre wrote about desire as emerging in the space where autonomy meets recognition, where someone sees themselves in the act of being seen by another. To a man watching a woman who is entirely her own person, that tension is palpable. She exists in her own gravitational field. He is not already inside it. He would have to earn his way in. And that, despite everything modern convenience promises us about ease and instant connection, is still the kind of thing that wakes something up in people. So when you find yourself in that space, felt but not pursued, noticed but not claimed, the question worth asking isn't what's wrong with me. It's something quieter and more interesting than that. What is his hesitation actually telling me? Because not all hesitation is equal. Some of it speaks to genuine internal conflict. A man navigating his own readiness, his own fear of being found wanting, his own tangled history with vulnerability. Some of it is simpler. Comfort in observation, an unwillingness to disrupt the ease of existing just close enough. And some of it, yes, is evaluation. Not cold or calculated, but instinctive, the way all of us quietly measure whether something is worth the risk before we reach for it. Learning to read the difference is where things get genuinely useful. Consistency is one of the clearest signals available. Not the dramatic gesture, the grand declaration that can mean very little in practice, but the pattern. A man who remembers what you told him 3 weeks ago, who initiates contact not just when it's convenient, but when something reminded him of you, who finds his way back to a conversation even when there was no particular opening. That kind of consistency takes effort, and effort is always more honest than intention. Emotional attunement is subtler, but equally telling. Neuroscience has documented the cascade of empathy-related responses that genuine interest triggers. The slight lean toward you in conversation, the softening of tone, the way his attention doesn't drift when you're speaking, even in a noisy room. These aren't performances. They're harder to fake than words, which is exactly why they're worth noticing. When a man is truly focused on someone as a person, rather than admiring them as a presence, his body tends to say so before his mouth does. Timing reveals a great deal. If he reaches out only when it's frictionless, only when the path is clear and risk is minimal, that tells you something. It doesn't necessarily mean he isn't attracted. It might mean he hasn't yet built the courage to want you in any weather, not just the easy kind. A man who is genuinely drawn to you will occasionally be awkward about it. He'll sometimes say too much or not enough. Real attraction has rough edges. The perfectly calibrated, always convenient attention is often the kind that doesn't go anywhere. Jane Austen spent her entire career documenting this exact dynamic, and she did it with such precision that we're still recognizing ourselves in it 200 years later. Darcy notices Elizabeth immediately. He watches her. He's affected by her. And then he stalls, caught between his genuine feeling and his own pride and self-assessment. His hesitation isn't indifference. It's a man grappling with how much she has disrupted his understanding of what he wanted. Elizabeth, for her part, doesn't chase. She barely adjusts herself at all. She is simply so entirely herself, in her opinions, her humor, her refusal to be flattered into approving of him, that he eventually has no choice but to mean it. It is, when you think about it, a very elegant kind of leverage. Not leverage in the cynical sense. Leverage in the sense that a woman's full, honest presence is more persuasive than any strategy she could layer on top of it. There's also, worth naming plainly, the matter of his own readiness. A man can notice you with complete sincerity and still not be in a place to do anything with that noticing. Past relationships that didn't heal cleanly, uncertainty about what he actually wants, a comfort zone that's become something closer to a hiding place. All of these create a gap between desire and action that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with where he is internally. This doesn't mean you wait indefinitely. It means you don't automatically interpret his stillness as your failure. Cultural conditioning adds another layer. Men are still, in many environments, quietly held to contradictory standards. Expected to pursue, but also expected not to fail, not to look foolish, not to misjudge the situation. A woman who is clearly autonomous, clearly comfortable in herself, disrupts the social script he may have relied on. He has to improvise. Some men find that exciting. Some find it disorienting. Both are honest reactions, but only one leads somewhere worth going. And then there's the simple psychology of challenge. People, not just men people, are oriented toward what requires effort. This isn't a flaw to work around. It's just how desire operates. The things we have to work for accumulate meaning in a way that freely given things often don't. When a woman's attention is genuinely selective, when her time is genuinely full, when she is not watching the door waiting for him to walk through it, that selectivity registers. His noticing her becomes weighted with a question. Can I earn a place in something that isn't waiting for me? That question, when it takes root in someone, is where pursuit begins. So what does any of this mean practically? Not as a set of rules to follow, nothing real was ever built on a checklist, but as a way of orienting yourself. The foundation is this: your life needs to be genuinely full, not as a tactic but as a fact. Passions that have nothing to do with him. Friendships that sustain you. Goals that wake you up in the morning before he enters your mind. When those things are real, they're visible. Not because you're broadcasting them, but because a person who is truly invested in their own life carries it differently. He notices the difference. The subconscious registers it even when the conscious mind doesn't have the vocabulary for it. Strategic signaling is real and worth understanding, but it only works when it's honest. Responding thoughtfully rather than immediately. Not because you're playing a role, but because you have other things going on. Being warm and present when you're together, genuinely so, rather than performing interest or manufacturing distance. Letting silence exist without filling it. These aren't tricks. They're just the natural behavior of a woman who isn't desperate for a particular outcome. And that lack of desperation is, paradoxically, one of the most attractive qualities a person can have. When he does make an effort, a real one, however small, acknowledge it. Not effusively, not in a way that abandons everything you've been discussing, but genuinely. A man who feels that his initiative matters, that moving toward you produces something real, is a man who keeps moving. That feedback loop doesn't require you to dissolve into approval. It just requires you to be honest when something has value. And patience. Not passive waiting, but composed patience, changes the entire texture of the situation. The woman who is at peace with not having the answer yet, who isn't manufacturing urgency because she can't tolerate ambiguity, who trusts her own read of the situation without needing immediate confirmation, she creates a gravitational pull that anxious pursuit never could. There's a paradox buried in here that's almost irritating in how true it is. The less urgently you need him to act, the more urgently he tends to feel the pull to. Cleopatra didn't chase Caesar. She appeared in her own time, on her own terms, in a way that made pursuit feel like the only reasonable response to her existence. That's not a story about manipulation. It's a story about a woman who understood, on some fundamental level, that her value didn't require his confirmation to be real. The ultimate reframe in all of this is straightforward. Even if living it takes time, you are not waiting to be chosen. You are the environment in which the choice either presents itself as meaningful or doesn't. His attention is not the prize. His considered, deliberate, willing pursuit of someone who doesn't need to be pursued, that's the prize. And it only becomes available when you've stopped treating his noticing as a destination. He notices you. He hesitates. That space in between isn't empty. It's full of psychology, history, fear, desire, and his own internal calculation about what he's capable of and what he believes he deserves. Understanding that transforms everything, not because it gives you control over him, but because it gives you clarity about yourself. You're not standing at a door waiting for it to open. You're living in a house with so many rooms worth exploring that the door, honestly, is just one of several interesting possibilities. When a man watches a woman like that, a woman entirely at home in her own life, not performing independence but actually living it, something tends to happen. Slowly sometimes, but it happens. He stops watching, and he walks toward her.